Well, I want to welcome everyone. It's always good to see a healthy turnout for discussions happening at Hudson. It's in the community. Tonight's meeting is a follow-up meeting from last week when Brian, Louisa, who I thought would be here tonight, I spoke to her earlier, she said she'd be here, both from the Columbia County Sanctuary Movement, Chief Ed Moore, Tom DiPietro, President of the Common Council, and Kamal Johnson, who chairs the Police Committee for the Common Council. They met with me last week to discuss a recent ICE action in Hudson. And at that meeting, we agreed to continue the discussion and set up another meeting that was going to be held in Lee next week. During the past Common Council meeting, it was requested that that meeting be made public, and consequently we're here tonight, and I thank you all for being here. Just a reminder for everyone, this is a public meeting, not a public hearing. We'll do our best to accommodate any comments at the end, but our purpose is to continue the dialogue from last week's meeting and determine that the city is properly following the guidelines established with the welcoming and inclusive Commissioner's Order. At last week's meeting, we reviewed and discussed the incident that occurred on March 5th with ICE as to determine if there was police involvement. In 2017, Hudson produced 3 documents that stated we are a welcoming and inclusive city. The initial document, dated February 20th, 2017, was a Commissioner's Order. The second document dated March 21st, 2017, was a resolution passed by the Common Council. And the following document, dated May 18th, 2017, was the final welcoming and inclusive City Police Commissioner's Order. Additionally, from last week's meeting, there were other topics that came up regarding the resolution and orders and the adherence and enforcement that were determined that needed some additional clarification. These will be discussed tonight as well. I want to personally, again, reiterate my position. 2 years ago, I was a member of the Common Council and sat in this room, as I've said before, and both supported and voted for the welcoming and inclusive resolution that was ultimately adopted into the Commissioner's Order. I continue to support it, and I will continue to do my best to uphold it. If there is ever any information from anyone in this city that can tell me that we're not adhering to this, I ask you to please come forward to me immediately, to my office, via phone call, email, or whatever. I am here 5 days a week. No one is on trial here. We are simply determining if any revisions are needed for the adopted resolution and order. I kindly ask that we all remain polite and respectful of each other this evening and try to make this as a productive and worthwhile meeting. So with that said, again, I welcome you all very much. I thank you. Our agenda for tonight is relatively simple. We're going to review the previous meeting, find out if there's any progress and further information that came from the past week, any new information discovered, any suggested corrections and revisions to the current procedures, and then hopefully some public comments, and adjourn on this beautiful Friday night. So, just quickly, I have had a few meetings, and I don't really want to do all the talking tonight. But I've had a few meetings. I've met with Brian individually, the police chief individually, and then as I mentioned, we've had a meeting last week with the 4 of us, 5 of us plus Louisa, and I hope she shows up. During that meeting, we discussed what happened on the 5th and brought up other issues that were really had not been discussed before that may needed clarification. And that's and there were 3 specifics to those. One was the idea of what happens with immigration pedigree information post and pre-arrest. The second was what the translation process is for the City of Hudson and the police department. And the third was if we could determine when ICE comes into town, what kind of warrant they're holding, if they let us know they're coming into town. Is that correct, sir? Yes. Is that everyone's recollection?
I also recall some clarification on inquiring into immigration status.
Post-arrest.
Yeah, that's pre and post-arrest. Yeah, and I think that was the first thing I said. So absolutely, those 3 issues. And clarification. So we left saying let's all review this if we can come up with any additional information. So with that said, I would like the police chief, if appropriate, to describe what happened on March 5th here in Hudson.
Thank you everyone for being here. Under the first Commissioner's Order of 2017, February, I'm required to make report when we do have ICE contact. I did so in writing, first by phone, then followed up by writing to the mayor and council president. So to lay out what happened, on the morning, Tuesday morning, March 5th, just before 9 o'clock, I got a call from an ICE agent, a supervisory agent, who said they had pulled a car over on North 5th Street and Warren Street, and that he had warrants for 2 occupants. The driver was Brian McCormick, and that they were meeting with some resistance. I immediately had the communications specialist dispatch a car to the scene, who did so at 9:02 a.m., so about 2 minutes later. I immediately called the officer that was responding. The other one was going to follow later, and told him that we had no information. I had gotten no information about the nature of the warrants. I instructed the officer to proceed to the scene to ensure officer safety and public safety as the ICE agents attempt an arrest. I followed this up with a call to the mayor, advised him of our involvement that morning. At 9:06 a.m., the HPD officer arrived at the scene. He advised me that the ICE police vehicle, which was a white SUV, was parked behind a green Toyota with its emergency lights activated on the ICE vehicle. The officer positioned his vehicle behind the ICE vehicle and stood between the vehicle and the rear of the ICE vehicle to monitor the situation. Several ICE agents were gathered near the rear of Brian McCormick's Toyota. At 9:07, about a minute later, a second HPD officer called out at the scene and joined Kaiser standing in front of his police vehicle. Both officers could see from their vantage point Brian sitting behind the wheel of his car, but could not see the 2 rear passengers. 9:10 a.m., ICE Agent Hill approached the 2 HPD officers and advised them that they're not going to effect an arrest. And at 9:11, 1 minute later, the 2 HPD officers radioed out of the scene. So that was the extent of our involvement last Tuesday.
I apologize, I meant to start the meeting out like this. I'm a little bit nervous, but I would like to ask us all to take a quick minute, and I apologize for doing this in the middle of this, but it's purely an accident on my behalf, to take a quick minute just to a silent contemplation of the devastating act that happened in New Zealand, both for the Muslim community and humanity at large. So if you would please just take a minute or to contemplate and however you feel best. Thank you all very much. Just trying to stretch position, but. All right, so Chief, that's to your estimation, Brian. From what the Chief just described, what was your perception of what happened on the 5th of March?
My perception is pretty similar. I mean, it sounds accurate to what I experienced myself. My concern with what occurred is that there was no questioning or verification of what type of warrant the ICE agents held before there was police dispatch. In addition, I think there is some discussion that needs to be had around what constitutes assistance and what officers do when they are assisting or dispatched to a scene that ICE is active in. And thirdly, I would dispute that they simply stood at bay and watched because I actually have photographs that HPD was photographing myself and my passengers at the time of the incident, which I would believe ventures into investigation.
Because I asked, could you supply us with those photographs?
So this is an up close of the officer, and this photograph shows his vehicle number. There's two different photos. I made 2 copies of each.
So, may I respond?
Sure.
The Hudson Police has one mission, and one mission alone, that's public safety. The type of warrant wasn't told to me on the phone that morning because I didn't ask. The caller was in the middle of some kind of an arrest situation, so not determining whether it was a judicial warrant or administrative warrant is completely on me.
Will you explain to the audience the difference between the judicial and the administrative warrant, please? Yeah.
Okay, so most of us police officers are familiar with the warrants that are signed by the judge. Evidence is brought in front of the judge, informations, statements, and we swear out a warrant, either an arrest warrant or search warrant, and we go and execute it. Federal government is a little different. They do go in front of the U.S. magistrate and get warrants for arrest, but the federal government authorizes ICE agents and other federal agents to basically act as the judiciary in this matter and sign the warrant for execution. And so this is basically a warrant to go out and get somebody that has not been before, the information has not been before a judge. So, so that's the difference between the administrative warrant or civil warrant and judiciary warrant. I know that the HPD did not record anything, despite the picture of the officer holding his camera up. I asked to review his phone, and there was no actual video taken. Again, the decision to send someone over there to the scene was solely mine, and it was solely mine out of the interest of public safety. I think that the officers, from every account that I got, did exactly what I ordered them to do, which is to stand post, observe what was going on, in case things get out of hand. Everybody here knows that traffic stop regardless. In fact, I didn't even know what the warrants apparently were for. So it could be anything from an administrative warrant to a warrant for a violent person. So the officer was instructed to stand post, observe, and if anything happened, is to ensure public safety. To my knowledge, that's what they did. I don't know of them colluding or plotting with ICE or having discussions with them outside the car or trying to affect the arrest or even speaking to Brian. I'm pretty sure they did. So in my estimation, they did what they were told, but I want the folks here to know that the reason that they went over there is because I told them, and the reason that I told them is I was interested in public safety.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask a question? Sure. And this is strictly for clarification. In the picture, it's an actual camera, not a phone. Do you know why they would be taking it?
I'm sure
pretending to take
that's the
pictures?
patrol camera. He did not take a picture. I checked the camera in his phone. There was no pictures taken and none put in any kind of report.
Does ICE always notify the police department when they're coming into town?
Well, I get notified when they're here, but if they don't notify me, there's no way I would know. So I would say that they don't always notify me. Every time that they do notify me or we have any kind of interaction, you get a report.
Chief, could you explain how they know that suspects are at the Hudson court system?
Well, I'm guessing now, and educated guess, I suppose. But if we arrest someone in the city of Hudson for a crime, they're fingerprinted, and an arrest report is taken, they're arraigned before the judge, and their name appears on the court docket. So I'm thinking that, and one of the fingerprints we take on, or FBI, goes to the FBI. FBI is a federal agency. I can't speak as to what access another federal agency has to that when the person's identified via their fingerprints. So I don't know, but I'm going to guess that they share the information.
Tom, when I found out, and I investigated this, and a couple of people came to me specifically, and I was naive and ignorant about how this occurred. You can go to New York State courts, you can pull up any court in the state of New York and find out who's going to be there, what judge is going to be there on any certain day.
Can you speak up for us back here, Mr. Frank?
Hi. Just saying that if someone, how potentially ICE would know if someone's appearing at the court, and it's public information on the website, on the New York court website.
But that doesn't answer how they would know that it's a undocumented person.
No, I'm not. I have no idea. It's everybody.
Right.
Well, typically, Tom, people when they're arrested for a crime, their fingerprint and an arrest report is taken. I'm going to guess that they don't access our local arrest report. I'm going to guess that through the fingerprinting system.
Which ICE has access to. That's
Yeah,
established.
I'm thinking so, yeah.
So if your officer, I'm just going to jump back to this real quick. I completely concur. I mean, there's numerous studies that we put out. We have publicized via our organization by other nonprofit legal organizations that have also concluded that the majority of arrests in New York State courts are happening because of monitoring of public information. There has been few instances in which there has been collaboration between police departments and ICE, or the court clerk and ICE, but that is not what we're necessarily insinuating here, and I believe that they probably did receive documentation through public information as well to know that they were going to be in court that day. It's also been shown that sometimes it's purely done on racial profiling by name. They go to a court and it's not even the individual that they're looking for. And it should be known that this is not the first time this has happened in Hudson, and there's been approximately 12 ICE detentions based on court arrests. Sometimes they've entered the courthouse, and other times, like this one, they've monitored outside of it. So it's an issue that's clearly beyond the Hudson Police Department. And one that, as a community and as organizations throughout the state, immigrant advocates and immigrants themselves, we're trying to create some kind of law that would prohibit that, because we do believe that it denies people due process. So for example, if an individual is taken out of court, even though the state has custody of them, they're not produced for court, and then an arrest warrant is issued in their name. So beyond due process, there's a right to speedy trial, there's deterrence of victims going to court and making reports, etc. Jumping back to the issue of
Louisa, come on up.
welcome. Going back to the situation of March 5th, I still wonder what makes an officer take the decision to hold a camera up regardless of if they're taking a picture or not. So it's either what I consider is intimidation or implied surveillance of an individual. And either way, I would say, regardless of if a photo exists, that I feel it's improper and should be addressed within the department.
Duly noted. If we had body cameras, I wish we did.
That would be automatic, wouldn't it?
It would be automatic, but the thing is, I know for a fact, and I guess the only way is to take my word for it, there are no pictures that exist of that scene taken by us or entered into any report. If the report, I assume, to be foilable, there just isn't one. So yes, I will take that into consideration, obviously. Listen, I want to, regarding Hudson, I should have said this right after the get-go. I don't know where ICE headquarters are. I've never been there. Hudson Police does not tip off. Brian probably knows where it is better than me. We don't tip off ICE We don't call them. At any given time, I have 2, maybe 3 officers working. ICE could certainly send down 22 officers. So I can assure the public the best that I can that we're not dropping a dime on ICE to say that we suspect someone here isn't documented. If anyone that spent any time at the department knows that we've enough going on. And it's never been our history to do that either. No Hudson police officer, as evidence I could submit that, I suppose, that no Hudson police officer, not during my tenure or perhaps before, has ever been subpoenaed to testify in an ICE prosecution or had to appear in trial, or we've never collected any evidence submitted to ICE. That would all be easily documented. So it's not much, but other than my word, but to say that we just don't appear in ICE prosecutions. If we gave a tip, I assume that would go into their probable cause and into their prosecution. Just doesn't happen. So that's all I got to say on that.
I would also like to return to the incident on the 5th. In your remarks at the beginning, you mentioned that you sent officers HPD for both officer safety, implying ICE officers as well as public safety. I'm wondering what public is being protected there. If ICE is trying to enter my vehicle, and under the Constitution of the United States, the 4th Amendment, they need a judicial warrant for search and seizure in a vehicle or in a house, and HPD was deployed while my rights were theoretically in the process of being violated, I don't see who else was being protected. Of course not the individuals in my car, besides the ICE officers.
Oh, okay, I understand. You got to put yourself in the officer's position that I sent over there. They have a lack of knowledge as to what's going on as far as what the warrants are or anything. I don't want to see a situation like the Old West where the local sheriff is fighting with the U.S. Marshal. That's not contributing to public order. They were there on a directive to contain the scene and protect public safety. Had things got out of hand, Brian, as much as they would protect the officers, I would suspect they would protect you too. If there was a melee or a fight, as we do a lot in Hudson, our guys calm the situation, or they're trained to calm the situation and knock the fight down rather than let it get out of control. So, and I think we talked in our private meeting that we talked about training so officers can discern an administrative warrant from a judicial warrant, and I've got some plans for that we can discuss. So maybe the next generation of this kind of interaction, the officers will be trained enough to go up and say, "Excuse me, sir, do you have an administrative warrant? What's going on here?" But let's go back to March 5th. Those guys were there under my orders to just contain, and I think they did a good job with that for the 8 or 9 minutes they were there.
Would that be appropriate in keeping with the friendly and inclusive city resolution for a Hudson police officer to directly ask an ICE officer a question like that?
Well, I mean, I think it's clearly outlined in the last paragraph of the resolution, the appendix, which does define what a civil immigration detainer is. So I personally feel, and I think it's the position of our organization, our community, that that's something I should have been asked about. And of course we do, we recognize and appreciate the commitment to do that in the future and to provide training. Doesn't justify how it's been happening thus far, but we do recognize the room for progress.
Brian, does ICE automatically have to give you that information and tell you what kind of warrant it is, to your opinion?
I think as a police officer, look, here's the situation. This active arrest situation like you were involved in, Brian, is going to be the exception rather than the norm. I would assume that most of the time if ICE came into town, they'd say we're looking for X, Y, and Z, and there's the opportunity to say, hey, what do you got? And we've had instances where they've had judicial warrants to catch really bad people. So I would say most of the time, if we had an interaction, we would be at liberty to say, hey, what do you got? And they would tell us and show us. This was a little unusual, and this is a dynamic situation happening on North 5th Street. And that's where, you know, you don't have the opportunity, excuse me, while you're handcuffing this guy, what do you got, and all this other stuff. That would all be sorted out, I would think, afterwards. So it's just unusual that we would get called at, you know, 8 o'clock in the morning or whatever and say, hey, run over here, we're in the middle of an arrest. Just haven't seen that one yet.
Chief, is there a timeline on the training? Like, can you
Yeah, we
explain, like, what?
Okay, so what happens is when an order goes out, like a commissioner's order, in fact, I'll say any order that goes out, in my experience, it always can be fine-tuned, added, altered, edited, as situations change. So we have the February commissioner's order, then we have the one later in May that's expanded on. So now we're into the next iteration of this, which would be, hey, let's train up the guys as to what administrative is, what our procedures and policies are going to be. And I've told Brian before via email that, hey, our order from Mayor Hamilton became the policy. But now I agree, at Brian's suggestion, it's time to move on. So I contacted a bunch of people, but one that I really liked was Juan Figueroa, who's the new Ulster County Sheriff. And he produced a policy that he's implemented on end of February for the Ulster County Sheriff's Office. That's the one I particularly like. It'll have to be reworded to fit with Hudson Police. But in it lays out the things we want it to lay out. Okay, what does a cop do when he approaches this? How does he just tell the difference between one warrant and the other? What are we allowed to do? I also attached the case law. There's state case law that from the appellate division that I'm going to have my officers read. Here it is, the Marco case, Brian, which I think you would know. So what it is, it's a law from last year that, or a case law that says that HPD can't, or any local police department can't hold someone on a detainer. So we're going to get the information out there in policy regarding administrative warrant, regarding judicial warrant, regarding detainers, and all these other things that might come to a new officer out at the scene. So the policy will be retooled. I'll show it to you. Depends on how much I get to it by next Friday, which our meeting is Thursday. But my intent is to take that policy and adapt it for HPD and to be very transparent, show you guys.
Police committee meetings next, is that what we're saying?
No, I think we have another meeting.
We have a meeting that we scheduled after the.
Oh, I thought, well, we agreed that this would take its
Okay,
place.
well, that's what I didn't know.
Well, so you know,
We can
we're
still
developing a policy that expands on the Commissioner's Order of May.
Well, I mean, if that time frame is good and you figure out by next week, I think we'd be happy to see it.
Yeah, I think the more progress we have.
Yeah.
I agree, and I appreciate you reaching out to Ulster County. I do want to make it known that in our first meeting about this, when you became mayor, I made it very clear that I have a whole database of police department procedures and different executive orders and resolutions from around the country, including the state of New York. And I think it's sad that we've gotten to this point that we have to have this conversation when we could have had it that far back. And Chief, you could have had access to similar policies prior to this incident as well.
Well, that policy, the one that I particularly liked, was just came out 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So, you know, the other thing too is we have so little, I can't impress upon people enough, we have so little contact with ICE. Your department, your small department, maybe 25 guys, we just don't reach out for them. We don't interact, plot, or collaborate with them, period. We don't even have a millionth of the resources they do. If ICE wanted to send an army down here, on that given day, March 5th, I got 2 guys working, and they're busy. One was out of call. So they could overwhelm us with resources. So yes, I do agree, we could have policy, but our interaction is so limited and so little, and the history of the HPD is exactly the same. If you reach out to the past chiefs or officers that work here, we just don't interact with these guys.
I think the intention of the order was also not to direct or divert police resources, so I think it's a strengthened argument for not sending officers with limited capacity who are already responding to other calls as well.
Yeah, I would be glad not to do it, not to have them there at all, so.
We found common ground.
The other is, can we move on now? Anything else?
Anyone else?
Because I'd like to address the other issues that we talked about. The translation, to make it easier to have a conversation with people. Chief, can you reiterate our position on that, please?
So, there's two contacts with the person who does not speak English. One would be at the arrest, the other one would be in front of the judge. When there's a crime, an arrest report is taken, the person is booked, they're brought in front of the magistrate. If we can't communicate with the person, we've had a history at HPD to bring in a translator, either from the sheriff's office or the state police. And that's to do the booking procedure. And we haven't had an instance since I've been here where we need a statement pursuant to, let's say, a shooting or some kind of crime that I can remember offhand. In that case, we would have to bring a translator in. Well, let's suppose a person's arrested for a crime and they can't understand the language. Your Hudson City Court, you're under the rules of the Office of Court Administration, has a couple things available. There's a language line, which is a phone device that you can request a translation real time. There's one located at the clerk's window, and there's one actually located on the judge's bench. So if you go into Hudson City Court, right there where the judge sits, there's a language line. There's also a real-time video recorder, which is a television turned on its side with a camera. So that's in the courthouse too. So a defendant who can't understand, doesn't know what's going on, needs to be given certain rights and explain things. They can go in front of the real-time video recorder and speak to an attorney or a translator. Public defender also speaks Spanish, which is helpful, but the court has their own procedures on this. The OCA does. Just last week, there was an interpreter in there for Bangladesh defendant. So that's the procedure. I sent you an email today, Brian, that documents, I showed you pictures of the different devices that are put throughout the Hudson City Court, so that the person knows their rights.
Are they notified of all these measures on arrest?
Yeah, the judges, you can check with the OCA, their exact procedures, but every magistrate, especially here in Hudson, goes through a whole list of, so that the defendant understands what the proceeding is and what's going on.
So, I guess my concern here is that you mentioned that the two contacts are upon arrest and in court. We're aware of situations where if there was an actual language access policy being practiced by the HPD, we're pretty confident that there would have never been an arrest. HPD was trying to communicate with an individual. There was no interpreter provided. The individuals didn't understand anything that was being said, and because they didn't come down to the station, an arrest warrant was issued for them.
What was the crime, do you know?
At that time, it was just a charge.
What was the alleged?
The alleged charge was endangering the welfare of a child, or a child that got out of their stroller. But in addition to that, I have two sworn affidavits here from the individuals that were in my vehicle on the day of March 5th, and both of them have sworn that one of them told HPD that they didn't understand English, and the officer said, okay, and then continued to conduct himself in English the entire process of his arrest and examination of the scene was done in English. and the other individual didn't say that he didn't understand English, but he didn't understand English, and there was no translation or language access provided to him as well. And these are just the two most recent individuals that happen to be in my vehicle.
This was on March 5th?
Correct.
So,
Well, no, these individuals were in my vehicle March 5th. One had an interaction on, I believe, March 2nd, and the other was on January 28th, and in both instances
This
there
is not about the ICE incident, this is separate.
well, I'm saying that during their arrest, their original arrest, they were not provided with language access, and they happened to be the two individuals that were in my car on March 5th as well.
so the question is, the police department, policemen don't bring people to jail. There's a process in where they appear in front of the magistrate. The OCA has clear and a lot of equipment and clear policies regarding making sure the person understands their rights prior to going to jail and set bail. Our contact would be a booking procedure. So I'm wondering at what level, and this is something maybe not for this meeting or maybe for a more detailed investigation, but what extent was my officer trying to glean information? Was he taking a statement from him? And if he was questioning and the person didn't understand English, how could they communicate at all? So this is something that I would think would bear a more detailed, investigation or looking into.
Well, the executive order under number 7 says individuals with limited English proficiency, so even if somebody understands English but can't communicate in it, I think it would fall under the language assistance policy, which is called for in the which I'm not aware of existing. In addition, I would imagine that when an officer is conducting their business on the scene of an alleged crime, that they would want to know the specifics and the investigation or evidence gathered for that crime should be done in a way that the individual understands. So for example, in this instance, when somebody was taking a breathalyzer or doing a field sobriety test, the whole thing was explained to them in English. So they had no ability to understand what the breathalyzer was, which it is their right to refuse. And also instructions on how to do the field sobriety test were delivered in English, which is somebody's limited English proficiency.
So there's two things here. First thing is, it would seem to me that the prosecution would fail in that matter, that case would be dismissed. Secondly, I'm not going to speak for the district attorney or the judge, but it seems to me if a person gave a statement and was not aware of their rights and was not Mirandized and all that other stuff, that prosecution would go away. Secondly, we're about halfway, 3/4 of the way through, maybe halfway through developing all brand new policy for the city of Hudson. So I would extend an invitation to you that as we develop a policy for arrest, this exact same situation, I would be glad to have you review it and look at it and discuss it with you so that we have it built into our brand new policy, which we should roll out sometime less than a year from now. I would hope maybe 6 months from now. So I would be glad to let you look into that because we want to have successful prosecutions too. We don't want to deny anyone their rights.
I would definitely welcome the invitation and still believe that if this order was passed in May 2017, that there should have been more progress than what there is now on the language assistance policy, especially considering how much it's affecting our community right now.
Very good.
The third conversation that we asked for clarification was the discussion of how a detainee is requested for pedigree information. And it was pre-arrest versus post-arrest conversation. Has there been any discovery since our conversation?
We looked up, okay, so when someone gets arrested, anybody gets arrested, there's standardized arrest report that the state uses throughout, I would think, all police agencies in New York State. Don't ask me the form number, but it's obviously some kind of form number. So anyway, on that arrest report, there's a question as to the person's residency. So the question is, can we, Hudson Police, ask a person, hey, are you a U.S. citizen or not? So, I would submit to you that that's the standard practice, the standard normal booking procedure. It has been for many years. This department would simply need some kind of a statement, anything from a legal authority to say that we are not allowed to or don't have to ask that question, and we would be glad to enter that into our policy. The only thing I'm going to bite off is some kind of legal authority. I'm not going to do it independently, because what we're trying to do is just do things within the standardized procedures.
So what we talked about in the meeting was the input that we could get from the Attorney General's office would be satisfactory.
Yeah, when I talked to Lord S. Back in 17, who heads the civil rights for the Attorney General's office, and Mayor Hamilton, we were having many discussions with her, setting up the thing. We're trying to figure out, okay, what's the intent of the policy and how do we implement it? So I do know for a fact that the post-arrest procedure was never discussed. So it's kind of, maybe we can define it better, but it was never discussed when we implemented the policy.
I would argue that the executive order would be enough of a legal opinion, considering the content of the order came directly from the Attorney General's office at the time, which was known to all parties involved during the resolution process and the executive order process. And in addition, I've sought information from an attorney to analyze the language within this document, who stated that there's multiple case law that suggests that statutes and executive orders of this nature should be interpreted in its plain and simple form, which would mean that this clause within number 7 of the executive order, which states Hudson Police Department personnel shall not inquire about or request proof of immigration status or citizenship when providing services or benefits, that the plain language of that does not make any mention of pre or post arrest, therefore it applies to both of those, and that all services that, well, everything that the Hudson Police Department does is technically a public service, so post arrest would be included in that sentence.
Okay, so have you read paragraph 5?
I have in paragraph 5.
It says, individuals in custody of the Hudson Police Department shall be subject to the same booking procedure regardless of actual or suspended citizenship or immigration status. So I would submit that that would need some clarification, because the very same order says that we will book people as we always have.
I'm definitely open to clarification, but the actual title of number 5 is pertaining to when federal immigration enforcement's make requests to the Hudson Police Department.
It's under due process. It's under due process. It says the booking procedure will be what we've always done, and we've always asked citizenship. But it's not even an argument, because if you can show me some legal authority other than case law, something from the AG.
This is from the AG, though.
The original template was, and I spoke to lawyers too. But the point of the matter is that that's how I interpret the language. If you give me any document from the AG's office that says we can't or don't have to ask that question, I have no problem. We won't ask it.
Any comments?
Brian, is that in the works? Because we were going to reach out to the AG's office, but you said they will only respond to
A municipal
municipality.
authority,
Does
yeah,
that mean
exactly. So
someone
Tom
from common
is
council?
reaching out to them. But again, this came from the AG's office. He issued guidelines to the AG at the time, Eric Schneiderman.
Yeah, who isn't there anymore, I understand, but I do remember that, I remember Lord S. from the Civil Rights thing. She was very pleased with our policy, and it's like anything else. As you grow into a order or into a law, it has to be refined, understood, trained before you can really have a full working understanding.
I think if we had done that then, or anyone had suggested that maybe 6 months out, we looked to see whether everything was working, whether there was something that needed to be clarified, that would have been helpful, and maybe it's something that we can put in place now, so that we are continually looking at this and seeing how it's working in the community.
And the thing is, got so much stuff going on in the city, so much stuff going on in the department. This is our 4th contact with ICE since February 17. So maybe if we had more frequent, more frequent interactions, this would have spurred this on a little faster to everyone's satisfaction. But once again, our contact is so infrequent, it's hard to really explain to people. While this March thing was the most recent one, it's only been the fourth one in 2 years.
Again, definitely open to clarification, but I would again reiterate that I reached out to the mayor multiple times. I reached out to the police chief. There is a little, there is an issue with scheduling, but I don't believe that there was faithful and transparent leadership from you all in the process of trying to figure this out sooner.
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't realize we had a problem, and it was never brought to my attention as it being a problem, but again, we will do whatever is necessary. That's my commitment, to fix something, to clarify something. Both the chief and myself, we've had this conversation many, many times, and we have police committee meetings monthly that all these things are discussed, and I would even probably consider, well, no, I won't get into that right now, but I apologize if I've done something that needs to be improved. It will be improved, and that's both the commitment of I think our police chief and myself. And if somebody can show me something that needs to be changed, it will be changed. Anything else?
The last thing that I would like to bring up, which was partially brought up in the last meeting, but we didn't have any next steps on, was the confidential nature of the reports that are made regarding ICE contact. There's nothing within this order that states that they should be confidential, and because they're confidential, the public has absolutely no way of ensuring that the enumerated information within the order is actually included in the report. I mean, there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 different bullet points of what should be included in the report. And I'm not saying that it's not all there, I'm just saying that we have no way to verify it. And there's nothing that specifically says it needs to be confidential except for...
Well, it's not, can I address that, Brian?
Of course.
So it's not necessarily confidential if I supply it to the city council, or the city council and the mayor. We had this discussion, I had this discussion with Mayor Hamilton about, what kind of report do I develop? Is it foilable, and to whom it goes to, and is it public? And had discussions with ICE about it. So the concern was, hey, if you're going to report your interactions, police interaction with us, are you going to compromise an active, serious investigation? We're not talking about someone on a detainer, we're talking about a serious investigation. So it was agreed amongst ourselves that as fast as possible, I would get the report out to the mayor, the elected official, and to the alderman. So, like to give an example, I just pulled this one up. Here's one from October of 18, where ICE was in town and had information about a John Doe warrant based on someone who was suspected of robbery, assault, and attempted murder, and gang assault, and possession of a weapon. So the fear there is that if I were to type it up, send it out, put it on Facebook or whatever, that would compromise their investigation and quite possibly endanger the officers and members of the public. So it was kind of resolved back then that, hey, I would be transparent to the point of telling the mayor and the president of the council as to what was going on. So that was the intent behind the apparent secrecy of the report. But I have dutifully made those reports with every contact, and if it's not by phone, it's usually within minutes. So that's my part of being as transparent as possible. But the concerns by the federal agent was that too much information out to the public could compromise the investigation.
And when we get those reports, it says not to say you're not.
Right. Right, it says not to disseminate, yeah. And you guys, to my knowledge, they never have been. But you can understand their point of view, I suppose, that, hey, we're in town, we're on Green Street, and we're looking for someone for smuggling operation, said that that could potentially be a dangerous situation.
I mean, I would add that on, sorry.
Well, Chief, couldn't we distinguish between the type of
Yeah.
criminal activity that's involved so that we could,
Yeah. Yeah, you could actually, if you went through the 4, or I forget how many.
no, I mean, in terms of making confidential or not?
Yeah, what you could do is you could take, for example, the 4 or 5 that I've sent, and you can see the differences in them, you know? So I don't think that the federal government's gonna arrest me if I say, hey, they were in town and they had a detainer warrant for somebody, or you know, administrative warrant for it. But I think I would be in a heap of trouble if I said, hey, there's a, you know, a sex trafficking case over on a specific neighborhood. I think that I would be getting into some trouble.
Before we do that, I would rather us have some kind of rubric on,
Mhm.
because I don't want to be putting information.
That's why I sent it to you. I want to offload it too. So,
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree, and specifically in number 8, it says that there would be no personal identifiers, which does hedge against it a little bit. And I also want to bring attention to the fact that the report requests any documentation that accompanies their presence here, which would also help us understand and document when they're coming with civil and or judicial warrants. And I want to make it clear that I don't have access to the report, but I do know on that same day in October they took 3 individuals who overstayed their visa, which is a civil violation, which is like me getting a traffic ticket, and there was no violent offenders or anything taken in the meantime.
Any other comments from the group? Now I'd like to open it up to the public. I ask that you please, again, be respectful and polite, and tell us your name and your residence, please. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Emily Carpenter. I don't reside in Hudson, I do work here. In full disclosure, I'm a volunteer with Columbia County Sanctuary Movement. So I have 2 questions for you, Chief Moore. And I want to say I really appreciate the responsibility that you took for what happened on March 5th, that was under your orders that your officers were sent, et cetera, et cetera. I know, my question is kind of similar. I am concerned that there wasn't training that took place between last May of 2017, when this executive order first came out, and now about the difference between the warrants. And, you know, I understand that it's a small force and it might not come to the top as a priority. I also understand that the police union at the time that this resolution was being passed made a public statement that reflected their opinion that this was not a good idea, that they were not in support of the resolution. So knowing that the police force was against this idea from the start, and also knowing what you've expressed, that it's a small force with little contact with ICE, just weighing those 2 things, what is your opinion on why training didn't happen sooner?
because the orders are simple that I gave out is that as soon as there's any ICE contact, I'm to be told personally.
The training, about the training.
Well, hang on a
Yeah,
second.
okay.
The orders are so simple that they don't require any training now. We know that now we're going down the road of trying to educate our officers as to what the warrants are and what they're supposed to do. My orders were strict and to be followed. Any contact by any of my officers to contact me immediately, and then I will decide the actions going forward. So, and in my absence, one of my lieutenants. So those were pretty simple orders for anybody to even know. So what I'm saying is, hey, you're in contact with my officers, call me, then I will start the process rolling. I don't want them doing inquiries or doing anything beyond that. I want to take responsibility for that. As far as the police union goes, that's apart from me. But I do know that my orders have been followed. So now, as we learn more, as we all learn more, and as case law gets established about things like detainers and things, now we have more body of work to train our guys on, and we will. So we will have new policy, we'll have more elaborate, we'll elaborate on even the orders of May of 17, and we will be training. But up till now, anything that's happened with my guys' interactions, I've taken personal responsibility for.
Thank you. Second part of my question, I was really concerned by what was shared with the photos that Brian shared, and I haven't seen them. But, so what I understand from what took place in this meeting is that Brian was under the impression that there was an officer who was recording him. We see that that's true. You say the officer was not recording. What is your explanation and what is your opinion of the behavior of one of your officers walking by a citizen with a camera?
Police are encountered with cameras every time we go on patrol. I want body cameras. I want to be constantly videoing the public and us as our interactions so we have free and open, transparent behavior. I can't speak as to why he held his camera up or phone up or whatever it was, his camera up. I can't speak to you as to why he did that. The only thing I know is that's a Hudson Police owned camera. It's uploaded to the reports at the end of the tour, and there's nothing on it. So why he did that would be a matter of internal investigation.
Okay, that answers about your explanation. What's your opinion of an officer walking by with a camera that's not recording?
You know what? Until I get a more lengthy explanation, I really don't want to comment on discipline matters until I know all the facts. It wouldn't be fair to anybody, you or him alike.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Ms. Martin?
Would it be okay if I turned around?
Sure.
Okay. So when I put this order into place, the first police commissioner's order with Commissioner Harvey, it was really in reaction to what was happening, the political climate. We suddenly were faced with things that we'd never been faced with before, and I think that our response was completely appropriate. It was all brand new to everyone, but I think it was a step in the right direction. I will say that since then, what I have seen on the part of Chief Moore and the department is that they have been nothing but supportive of this. I do recognize that there was a response from the police union saying that that they were not supportive of the order. Please understand the police union is many of the memoranda that are issued may come from leadership of that union rather than all of the union members collectively. So that may represent the opinions of 4 people or 5 people rather than the opinions of 25 or 28 people. I think that since the order's been put into place, the police have really acted in good faith. When we look at what happened the other day, sorry, I'll stand back here so you can see me too. I think that what happened the other day was an unfortunate situation. Brian, I really commend you for what you did. It takes an incredible amount of bravery and just steel to do what you did, and it's really commendable. But we don't have all the facts. And what I'm seeing, and as I sit in the audience, I hear a lot of snorts and just when something comes up. This is incredibly counterproductive. Okay, what we as a community need to do is to stop pointing fingers at each other and trying to blame each other for what's happening, but rather work together to make sure that people are not detained unlawfully. And I don't want to say we need to do that gently, but that is a process, right? This is not something that happens overnight. Everyone is learning this on the fly, okay? So I would ask that everyone maybe take a step back and think about what the, what the responsibility of HPD really is, and that is truly to protect and serve. And in protect, that means that if a car is pulled over and there are 2 individuals in the back, and HPD has no idea what they may or may not be potentially detained for, you know, they have to protect public safety. They have to protect everyone around them. And I know that's hard to get your head around because we're all, you know, from the time we're kids, many of us are taught that, you know, police are scary, police are bad, police are out to get you. And I can see where that sentiment may come from. However, in my dealings with HPD and in my dealings with Chief Moore, I've never encountered that. Chief Moore's been nothing but a good actor. He's been transparent. He always has an open door policy. And so I would encourage people to continue to have these discussions with him, to listen to what he's saying and take him at face value, because he really is and has always tried his best to serve this community. This is a man that's been policing for 38, 39 years, and is yet not bitter, which is amazing to me, that you can do something where really you see people at their best and their worst every day. He's trying his best, and I agree that the policies could evolve quicker, but I do know that they're redoing their entire policy book, and this may not be at the top of the list. It should be near the top of the list. I wholeheartedly agree that we need to protect the most vulnerable members of our community. I was the first person to stand behind this order. I took a lot of flack for it. I was very happy to sign when the council passed the resolution for the Welcoming and Inclusive City. I was more than happy to put my signature on it. But I really encourage everyone to stop the finger pointing and work in a more productive fashion. And, and that includes me. I don't want to be judgmental in what I do. I know that the HPD has a difficult job. We as neighbors and as defenders of our neighbors have a difficult job. And we have to find some common ground in that. So this order is really to keep things in place, keep things in check, but it's, there's going to be a learning curve. It won't happen overnight, it won't happen in 2 weeks, it won't happen in 6 months, but it will go into policy, it will go into the new policy book. And, and please understand, everything I know about the chief, even now, after being mayor, is that he has an open door policy, he's always willing to talk. The same with Mayor Rector. So just understand that this was put in place with the right intentions in mind. I know that it was taken, perhaps with some skepticism by some, but really, with eyes wide open. We had the State Attorney General behind us on this, and we had meetings to make sure that everything we did was according to the book, according to the law, and it will take time, and I appreciate what everyone does. I'm with you. I don't want to see anyone unlawfully detained, but I also don't want to see HPD, they're really being tried in a court of public opinion in terms of their actions, and I think that that's just as unfair as I think both sides have a bit of unfairness to them, and I'm on both sides. So I'm happy to talk about it with anyone that wants to talk about it. I have no power anymore, back to the private sector, but I just wanted to give you some background as to how this got put in place, what my feelings were going into it, and what you may have felt initially from the police union. I think that those bugs have really been worked out. The makeup of HPD has changed fairly significantly since then, and and I hope that the conversations continue in a really positive direction. And I from the bottom of my heart, ask that the finger pointing stop, because it's really not, it's not benefiting anyone. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Anyone else in the audience? Yes, Claudia.
Claudia Bruce, 308 State Street. I didn't think there were fingers being pointed. I thought this was a pretty open discussion. I appreciated what everybody brought to it, Brian in particular, because he is studying what's going on, and the chief for answering the questions. So I missed that part of the meeting where everybody was pointing fingers. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Jennifer. I'm a resident of Hudson, and I just want to say I also didn't see any fingerprinting, but of course we all have different perspectives. And I'm very thankful that we're able to have this meeting and that you guys are very willing to be working with CCSN to move forward with this. I also want to add that I also want to make sure that we remember that a lot of the privileges that some people in this room have and the experiences that they have had with law enforcement is not the same. And I also want everyone up there to be aware that you guys don't represent the directly affected population. You guys aren't the ones who are living in fear. You guys aren't the one with families with mixed status. And I can say that that's something that affects me. So I understand it is a very long process, but I also want to add that it is a scary process and no one should have to live through that. So if there's a way that we can work this out so that it doesn't fall to the bottom again, that would be greatly appreciated. I do have one question. My question is about the status question, the asking status. Is there any, did you guys receive any legal requirements from the Attorney General stating that status needs to be asked, or is, do any other local law enforcement agencies ask status post-arrest?
I believe that Tom DiPietro is looking into the Attorney General. Is that what was discussed?
Trying to find out if it's a standard form, do you have to include that information?
We don't proactively ask people's status, period. We don't go down the street and say, where are you from, show me your papers. Don't do it.
I understand it's asked post-arrest, but
No, I'm talking pre-arrest. We don't do that. We don't walk in there and ask people their.
yeah, I understand
Oh, okay.
that, but I'm speaking to post-arrest.
Post-arrest, we're gonna straighten that out.
Because I also know that law enforcement agencies in this area, that some don't ask post-arrest. So
Oh, really?
I'm wondering.
We're using the same,
We're just talking about this.
We've talked in our meeting, but I'll tell you, it's the same report that's been used at least since 1994.
So it was one of the biggest questions we had from our previous meeting, and we're still pursuing it just for a little clarification of it. So if we can find out any information from the Attorney General or any other local police to how they're doing something differently, we'll certainly listen to it.
Well, thank you for doing that.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Steve, I just want to thank everybody for the exemplary way in which you handled what you said. And I want to compliment Brian for how he handled the situation. And Brian, if you ever become a lawyer, you're going to be an outstanding. Thank you very much.
I do have a question for the chief that, I mean, I think we're pretty confident we know exactly what the Attorney General is going to come back and say because all of this came from them to begin with. Once that happens and you get that clarification, how long will it take? I mean, those forms that's on that form, can that be taken off the form? What will it take?
Yeah, immediately,
Stop that?
yeah.
Okay.
My lieutenant's nodding, so he said yes.
In the meantime, could it just not be asked? I mean, you don't have to fill in every box of the form, is that
I
correct?
would like clarification on that too. I mean, we gotta remember that form was developed by the state. So I would like the state to tell me what now. So I don't know.
But we can move forward fairly quickly as long as that comes back.
If you told me tomorrow morning, you know, that the AG's office said, hey, don't ask that anymore, or you don't have to ask that anymore, it would be one.
Can I ask the mayor, in my communications, can we co-sign them?
Absolutely.
Great.
Yeah, I didn't know you were asked to do that. I was in a second. Tiffany, did you?
Just a quick clarification on the finger pointing. While it may not be happening in this meeting, I have been following social media, and there has been an incredible amount of finger pointing and negativity around this. So while we may not be voicing it in this room, I do read what everyone says, even though I may not comment on it. So that's yeah, it is.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's really what I'm referring to, and it's, you know,
Social
in this-
media?
I know, it's shocking, but there are, there's certainly people in this room that have come out in a very inflammatory fashion.
Gotcha.
So that's what I was referring to, not what was spoken about in this meeting.
I don't know anyone who would be upset about being pulled over by Department of Homeland Security and interrogated.
But one of the
I
things you said,
understand.
Brian, one of the things you said in social media was that we were collaborating, which is a synonym for plotting. I don't know how to demonstrate any further that we are plotting.
I don't want to digress, I think
Yeah,
we're getting into
that's-
I don't want to go there, but the point, I want to know they're either in a big fight.
No, we're not gonna get in a big fight. In fact, I would like to, I think that some of the comments from the audience have been quite good, and I really do appreciate everyone's being respectful of each other tonight, and I think this was an incredibly healthy conversation. I agree with Claudia, there's been a lot of information that was brought out tonight. During the past couple of weeks, there's a lot of information that I've learned. So I really want to thank everybody here. I think that we're going to, we can reconvene if you want to keep that next meeting
I think
for next week's
that's-
committee.
there's still people here with questions.
No,
I know they waited over an hour, so I haven't.
It's fine. Are there any more,
Nobody had their hands up.
any other questions or comments?
I haven't a question, I have a comment.
Yes, sir.
I haven't heard the word sanctuary mentioned here today. And you mentioned proficiency, and I wonder if that's what we're talking about, that someone be proficient in language as opposed to just being able to understand a few words. Another thing with the training, if you evolve as a sanctuary city, there certainly must be some guidelines that the community has to develop collusively, use that word, with the rest of the agencies in the city who deal with it. What are those guidelines to be? And the last thing I want to say is that there's an opposition of institution and behavior we're talking about here. We should identify what are the institutional codes that we abide by, and what are the behaviors that we're talking about.
So I can address that. Thank you. I appreciate you bringing that up. The term sanctuary, it has been an extremely politicized and polarized word. There's no actual definition for a sanctuary city or a sanctuary policy. The order that we have in front of us is called the Welcoming and Inclusive City order from the police commissioner, and that essentially would be compared to any other sanctuary order in another city. They're also sometimes referred to as Fourth Amendment orders or Fourth Amendment laws because it's around judicial warrants, which are outlined in the Fourth Amendment. But I do appreciate you asking the question around the language that we're using, and specifically to the language access. There is a point in here that outlines that the Hudson Police Department shall have a formal language assistance policy for individuals with limited English proficiency and provide interpretation or translation services consistent with that policy. So that's what we're referring to when we say it's been mentioned here. Thank you again.
Thank you. Anybody else? I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am.
I don't really have a question, I just want to say that
You please tell us your name and where you're from.
Jeannie Satter, and I'm from Ghent, but I certainly shop and come out here to eat.
Well, that's fine. You're
Things like
welcome
that.
here.
But I just want to say I commend the HPD. It's a very difficult, tough job they have, and this has made it much more difficult. And I just think everything he said that he did well, so I don't see them as the bad guys at all.
Thank you. Anyone else? Well, again, I am very gratefully appreciative of everyone, and thank you for being here. Again, it's been continued to be a learning process. We will get better and smarter, hopefully, as we go along. So thank you very much.